I really appreciate you showing me around, Dr. Neil. Just call me Neil. It's a pleasure to have you. It's always fun to talk about my work. And, I get a new perspective every time. Ollie was visiting a scientist named Neil Grossman. And Neil was a tissue culture scientist who was working on trying to recreate dinosaur muscle based on the limited DNA that we have from dinosaurs. It was a cool project. Neil was a big dinosaur fan. In fact, that day, he was wearing a dinosaur costume, which was the first thing Ollie noticed when he came in. He said, Dr. Neil, good to meet you. Do you always dress the part at work? Oh, no. You've caught me on an unusual day, Ollie. I just got back from doing a program at one of the local schools. I have a little shtick that I do where I dress up like a dinosaur and I tell the kids all about dinosaurs. It's fun. Um, yeah, I got back a little late. You got here right on time, so I haven't had time to change into my normal street clothes yet. Oh, okay. So yeah, what is it that you're doing here? Oh, come here, let me show you. So we don't have intact DNA samples from dinosaurs, but we do have some very limited sets. And so what I'm curious to see is there's all these new technologies around, lab-grown meat. And there's a group that made a meatball out of buffalo meat, mastodon meat. And so I wanted to see if I could do something similar, but with dinosaur meat. Because wouldn't that be interesting if we could grow some dinosaur muscle? And that might give us some insight into, how dinosaurs moved and maybe even, how thick they are. Because so much of what we know, all the pictures we have of dinosaurs, it's all based on bones pretty much. And if we knew more about the other tissues of the dinosaur, well, we just have a better idea of what they were. That is cool, Ollie. I'm sorry, that is cool, Neil. That sounds neat. So how far along are you? Oh, really far along. Hold on a second. Reached into a fridge that said food fridge. I just got back. I'm gonna eat my lunch while we talk, if that's all right. Sure, Ollie said. Yeah, no problem. And he picked out a glass bowl with some noodles and meatballs in it. So anyway, so it's a slow start, honestly, because we have a lot more mammoth DNA than we do dinosaur DNA because we have there's like frozen mammoths and stuff, and also just mammoths were much more recent than the dinosaurs were, by a long time. But over the past month, I've actually gotten some headway. We were able to get some basic cells to grow, so they're like real dinosaur cells alive on planet Earth in a way that hasn't been in a million years. That is cool. And that's all right here. I said, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the lab. That's my graduate student, Sarah and Samuel, two scientists, sort of looked up from their lab benches and waved. And we have some undergrads that work with us too. I mean, it's a great education project, so, it's always fun to talk about. So what's your background, Neil? I said, well, I did some paleontology, but I really did cellular biology, and then learned about stem cells and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'd say that I'm a tissue regrowth specialist. I mean, a lot of people that I talk to, are trying to regrow human tissues so people could, if somebody lost their ear, they could grow back an ear, or people are trying to grow organs so that if somebody needed a new liver, we wouldn't have to get a liver donated by somebody. We could grow a new one for them. But I decided to try something a little different. And he said, it's pretty far along. I said, yeah, yeah, check it out, check it out. Not a lot of people have seen this. And he reached into a different fridge that said, samples, be careful. And in there, he pulled out a petri dish. On that petri dish was a pretty good, sizable chunk of what looked like meat. I said, no, that can't be. Oh, but it is. It's just the first bit, but actually, it's growing really, really well. Um, right now, I have it submerged in a bath of acetylsalicylic acid. Uh, I'm sorry, acetyl salicylic acid, which seems to slow down the growth, but reversibly. So if I take it out of there, it'll start growing really quickly, actually. We're not 100% sure why that, I mean, that's basically aspirin. We're not 100% sure why it slows the growth down, but it's been useful because we want to do this in a controlled way. So let me show you under the microscope. And he put it under the microscope. He said, now check this out. We can pull it out of the acetylsalicylic acid. And oh man, I can see the cells are multiplying and dividing. I said, yeah, it's really a remarkable breakthrough. I mean, for one thing, if I can get this to work in normal things, then we can do cell-grown meat and not even have to have meat from, real animals anymore. But yeah, it's very exciting. I was looking at the microscope, and then he stood up and said, so what's next? I said, well, we need to do some tests on this to understand, what kind of tissue we're really making here. I mean, it looks like muscle, but, can we make it contract and things like that? And Ollie and then we're just, talking about the project, and it was really interesting. And then it happened. Neil wasn't quite paying attention, and he'd set his lunch down next to the microscope. He reached down and grabbed his fork and ate a forkful of noodles and kept talking. And then he reached down, and before he knew it, before Ollie could stop him, he had stabbed the chunk of dinosaur meat with his fork and lifted it up and tossed it in his mouth. He had sort of a weird look and looked back at his lunch. He said, huh, that's weird. And he chewed and swallowed, and all before Ollie could say anything. Ollie wasn't sure he'd seen it himself, but then he said, Neil, you just... What? Oh, sorry, you don't mind that I'm eating, do you? I said, no, Neil, but you just ate your sample. Neil dropped his fork. He looked down at the microscope, and indeed the sample was gone. Oh no. Oh no. That's months worth of work. I mean, I have my lab notebooks. I'll be able to reproduce it, but this is terribly embarrassing. Ollie, I mean, I don't expect you to try to keep it a secret. That was unprofessional. I shouldn't have been eating in the lab. But if you don't need to tell anybody. I mean, do what you have to do, but, this is terribly embarrassing. I don't feel well. Neil, you okay? No, I think I'm very stressed. And, whoa. I feel strange. All I could see, Neil was starting to turn green. Neil, you all right? I gotta get some fresh air. And he stomped outside. Oh, man. Oh, what a weird feeling. That doesn't feel good at all. And Neil kind of hunched over. And before Ollie's shocked eyes, Neil turned around, and his skin had turned green and scaly. And when he opened his eyes back up, they were lizard eyes. What's happening to Ollie? I think you need to go get help. I need a doctor. Something. And right as he started to say that, his nose started to stretch out, and he began to grow. He got bigger and more lizard-like. He was turning into a dinosaur, Ollie realized. The dinosaur costume ripped, and underneath there was the actual dinosaur, still human size, but growing bigger every second. Ollie panicked and he ran inside. He said, guys, your boss is in trouble. And they ran outside and they saw what was now mostly dinosaur, kind of still had some human features. And Neil was looking around, looking confused, but he couldn't even talk anymore because his face had turned into a dinosaur face and he didn't know how to use his lips. And so he just let out a roar. And by that time, he was 10 feet tall. And he kept growing. And he kept growing. I said, what can we do? The grad student said, what happened? What? He accidentally ate the sample of the dinosaur meat. Oh, no. Wow, that's really unprofessional. But he doesn't look well. What do you mean he doesn't look well? He looks like a 15-foot high dinosaur. Well, he shrugged and said he certainly does look like a 15-foot tall dinosaur. Except the thing is, I think he's still growing. I think we're up to 16 feet. What are we going to do? I said, well, I've got one idea. I don't know if it would work, but he said that the growth was suppressed by aspirin. Yeah, we usually keep it in an aspirin, like a bath of like dissolved aspirin, and that seems to slow it down enough that we can keep it under control. You don't think? I do think. I think we need the biggest aspirin ever made. Where are we going to get a giant aspirin? An old school compounding pharmacy? I know where one is. Do either of you have a car? I do, Samuel said. All right. You stay here, and me and Samuel need to go up the street. So they drove as fast as they could, and there's a compounding pharmacy, which is like a pharmacy where they, mix stuff up custom. They ran in the door. Said, it's an emergency. I need the biggest aspirin you can make. I said, what do you mean? I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but there's an increasingly giant dinosaur man down by the Hopkins campus, and we think the only thing that'll stop him is aspirin. Okay. The biggest pill form I have is this one, and it's actually meant to be a gag gift. It's like, but it's a pharmacy. It's a decoration, I guess is what I mean, but it should work. And he held up a pill mold that was about the size of an adult's head. All right, do it. Let's go for it. By the time we get back, he'll probably be big enough to eat it. So the staff all started rushing around and took all the acetylsalicylic acid that they had in stock. And they had the chalk and the waxes and the things that make into a pill. And they had to put it on the ground, and the pharmacist had to stand up and jump on it to press it hard enough to form into a pill. I said, all right, here goes nothing. And they pulled it open, and it held together. It was, in fact, a giant aspirin. Hold on, I know you're in a hurry, but I gotta get a picture of this. He took a quick selfie with an octopus, a graduate student, himself, and a giant aspirin. I left his card and said, bill me. And they ran off, got back in the car and drove as quickly as they could. By the time they got back, Neil was stomping around Charles Village, and he was 3 stories tall. The other graduate student, do you remember what the name was? I don't remember either. It's okay. Said, oh, thank goodness you're back. He keeps growing. He's not even sane anymore. Like, he is not responding to human words. He's just yelling. He hasn't eaten anybody, so that's positive, but most people ran away. Oh, we've got to get him this. And he held up the giant aspirin. It's just crazy enough to work, but how are you going to get to him? I'm going to have to climb on top of him, aren't I? Ollie said. The graduate students looked at each other. Neither of them wanted to say yes. It's a lot to ask. But they knew the answer was yes. So they grabbed the pill under one arm, and he scampered up. Neil was facing away, so Ollie just ran straight up the tail. Before Neil knew what was going on, Ollie was all the way up to his shoulders, and then Neil noticed. Tried to shake him off, but Ollie's grip was too good. Ollie climbed over to the face, grabbed onto, 7 of his arms, to the nose, and waited for another roar. Dinosaur Neil was mad by then, so he let out a mighty roar. Tried to shake Ollie off, but instead Ollie tossed the aspirin right down Dinosaur Neil's throat. With a big surprise swallow. The dinosaur shook his head, this time not to shake Ollie off, but out of confusion. He looked around. What? And then he started to shrink. And he shrank. And he shrank. And he shrank. And Ollie hopped off when he was about, 15 feet tall. And he started to bring his hands up to his head, and his hands were starting to look like normal human hands again. It was working. Bit by bit, he shrank. He shrank until there he was in a torn and tattered dinosaur costume. A human Dinosaur Neil once again. I said, Ollie, you saved me. What was that? It was a giant aspirin. Oh, that's a good idea. But it'll wear off. I gotta... And then all of a sudden he threw up a mighty throw up. The biggest throw up he'd ever had in his life. Out came several pounds of aspirin. And then, mercifully, one chunk of dinosaur meat. Oh, geez, that's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. One of the graduate students ran over, picked up the dinosaur meat piece, and put it back in the salicylic acid bath, or the acetyl salicylic acid bath. I said, Professor, are you okay? He said, no, I'm deeply not okay. I am deeply and profoundly not okay, but I'll be all right. Thank you, all 3 of you. Ollie, remember what I said about not telling anybody? I said, yeah, I'm not going to hold you to that. I said, yeah, I think people are going to hear about it. And that was the case of Ollie and the giant dinosaur.